Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to The College Muslim, Season 2. My name is Badruddin Muhammad.
And my name is Talha Rafiq.
And today's topic is going to be
using your tongue in a foul way. And for us, that's primarily going to be starting off with cussing throughout high school and college, and just all about that. And then we'll see where it goes from there as usual.
So. Yeah. That's kind of how we came up with this topic. We were like, what about cussing? And then we were like, wait, there's more to cussing.
Yeah, there is more cussing. So it's not like more. You can isolate cussing as a very specific thing. Yeah. That's just using like each society has different like bad words, quote unquote, and that is cussing. So it's just that's a very specific thing. And then if you like extrapolate that further, it's using like your tongue in any bad way and any bad, because it's a very powerful tool. The most powerful tool we have is our words. So
it's for that reason that like over time, the way we sort of preserve tradition and language and like anything that the world does, it's like through words. And that's why like even though English is like the subject that everyone dreads in high school, it's pretty important.
And learning how to talk to. So all right, starting with cussing. I don't know, when were you first introduced to that?
Yeah, that's one of my question too. I think for me, so obviously everyone has like that one friend in elementary school who's like, I know the F word.
I know all the words.
I know all the words. Yeah. Have you heard of this word? Have you heard of that word? That's kind of how it like starts out, and then you hear one or two words here and there from like the friend, and then everyone just like says it in secret, hush hush. And then I feel like at that age you still have the innocence to be like, or at least I don't know about this generation, but like I know our generation had sort of that innocence to be like, oh, this is like a bad word, we shouldn't be saying this. As long as you get older, you see older kids using it more often.
I'd say like in middle school.
Middle school, definitely. Yeah. And like sometimes we have like the cool teacher that like likes to use those words too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You had those?
Well, like not as bad, but like a little more harmless.
Yeah.
But like
I had like one teacher in middle school.
Yeah.
Who would allow like
the C word
or SHIT.
Yeah.
Yeah, those kind of. So like, but you know, that's not a great starting point because what's next isn't so great.
Yeah. So, yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, that makes sense. And then in high school is like when it really ramps up.
Yeah, I think even in high school, I was sort of the sheltered kid. I don't know about you, but for me personally, I was more of the sheltered kid. So I'd be like, I'm Muslim. I don't say bad words. It's a bad thing. Like using tongue is bad. Freshman year anyway. Then you slowly go, and then this is like the thing where I was getting into when I was brainstorming this topic. It's like sports. I think is for me personally, it was like the focal point and the gateway into cussing regularly on a regular basis, and most as a way to like fit in, most as a way because that was the culture on sports.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of my experience too. Like elementary school was like, there was one kid who was like the bad words dealer. Like he was like, which one do you want to learn, right? And so that's where it started. I never really cared much for it then. Middle school is kind of realized how prevalent it was. Yeah. Like it was everywhere. Like my middle school was a large public middle school. That's why. But by 7th grade, I knew everything. And I think I was using words, but I was still conscious sometimes when I was using it. But I was still too young to understand its connotation. Yeah. And then high school was like, I feel like high schools where habits are made. Yep. Right. Yep. And so then I was on the other side of you, so it was a part of my language, like using cuss words were a part of my language, and a lot of that again was due to sports because I played 3 sports year round. I was always on a sports team, right? And I played football, lacrosse, and soccer. And football and lacrosse, those two are very like American sports, and football especially, right? Yeah. So like it was used there, and it's funny because like I used to like I read a couple of research papers, and some people like some research papers said cussing is actually healthy for you, like in a way of like letting out energy and all that stuff. And I don't deny that because it is an expression of like passion in a sense,
and it's a release of like energy and just like frustration. And, and I'll get to that too. I have a thought on that.
You have a thought on that too, like the science. Yeah, and so that's my perspective too. Is like there is like this like release, and they're hard words. Yes. They end up with like the end of these words like. They have this like they have these hard words, right? Yeah. Everyone knows what words I'm talking about, so I'm not gonna say them.
Not on this podcast.
Not on this podcast. But they're harsh words, so they can give you like satisfaction, especially in playing a sport. If someone's like coming at you and you're just like,
I think the way our coach described it was a guy sport. So it was like, oh, guys have all this testosterone, so you gotta release it when you're like the energy that like when you're warming up. So it's fine to like yell and like say bad words.
So that made it fine. Yeah. So that's why it was in my vocabulary because I thought it was good. Yeah. But just because something can be presented as good doesn't mean that it's that you should be doing it, right? Even if it's giving you a benefit. where its connotation is still negative, where it's derived from is still negative, right? And it's still a harsh word. And the issue is when it becomes your habit, it gets transferred to the other areas of your life.
Well, places where you don't want it.
Where you don't. I mean, if you're on the football field, no one's gonna bat an eye if you cuss, right? If you're in a classroom
or the dinner table,
if you're in a classroom, somebody might look at you. But even getting more serious, like say you're trying to get married or something, right? Like you're trying to find a good, righteous spouse, right? What righteous spouse would ever marry you if you're the one cussing in every single sentence, right? Which is my take with like rap music too. And
I also want to touch on that, the whole every single sentence thing. I think that was a progression for me that I realized. So I think sophomore year of high school, that was when I like started getting into sports more immersively, and that's when I would like use cuss words only in sports, because I was like, that's the thing, that was a culture. People would like, when you're, like you said, when you're frustrated, whenever you do something wrong, or like whenever you're like in a state of heightened adrenaline. But then, like you said, it translates, and then you see the teammates started using it more, and then as you start going to classes, those same teammates you see in classes use it more, and by the time you know it, every single sentence you're using it as a way to express yourself.
It becomes your character.
It does,
right? And that's who you are. And I imagine
and people know you as like, oh, like that guy cusses more than this guy, or this guy cusses less, this guy doesn't cuss. It's a part of your identity at that point.
That's a problem. Like even like if you think about masjids, right? And you see like, I mean, I know from the guy's perspective, like I don't know the girl's perspective, but from the guy's perspective, when I realized like cussing was a problem was when people didn't start looking at you like it's a bad thing that you're cussing. Like all the guys were cussing, and to me that's like, well, it didn't originate there. They probably learned it in school or on a sports team, but it started creeping into their character. That's who they had to become. And when cussing is a part of your character and that's like the person you are, you forget using like cuss words on a sports field or like in a classroom. Like you are now using that with your kids, you're using that with your wife. Like, and that's like, it's an impediment on life too, in my opinion, because if you do want that righteous spouse, if you do want, kids who grow up to be good men and good women, and you want a group of friends in your masjid who are good people, you can't put black spots on your character, right? Like, and cussing is one of them. It's not maybe the biggest one, but it's one of them.
And I feel like it's a gateway into other things.
Yeah, it's a gateway into other things.
'Cause I mean, that just as you see it, like a lot of these cuss words, the meaning of these cuss words isn't that great.
Yeah, the connotation is negative.
The connotation, the exact meaning of what these cuss words mean in the English language is absolutely like terrible and sinful. But then the way we use them is in a way that like might not be. We could definitely sub that word out for something that's more harmless, that means what we're trying to actually say. We'll use that word instead, and then what happens is when you start going to situations where you want to use a certain word, like say if you want to like very, like the word just like something is as an adjective, like something is very good or very bad. Instead of saying very, you use another type of word that's a cuss word that we don't need to say on this podcast. But when you want to use that word in normal situations, like you say in the masjid, you want to say, oh, that food was really good, or that food is very good. But then you might use a different word. That's in an environment where you don't want to be saying those kinds of things. And you personally, inshallah, I hope that, like, at least for me personally, I didn't want to be using those words. I like deep down in my heart, I didn't want to be using those words. And when I would say those words, I'd be like, oh wait, I just said that word. Can't believe I said that. So.
And that's like when you don't realize the word's association. Like if you learn it in a sports context in high school, it's like if that's truly when you first learned it and that becomes part of your habit there, no one's gonna bat an eye, no one's gonna think of you wrong. Even the other guys who you're saying those words to on the other team, other coaches, they're not gonna look at it as a problem, right? And they're gonna brush it off because in a way the connotation there isn't negative.
It is.
Right? So it's not like this, but say you're in a fight with your wife or you're in a fight with your in-laws or something, or your parents. And you use the same word, even though you didn't mean to, the connotation there is going to be completely different. And there it's abusive and it's anger driven, right? And so something I wrote down earlier too was like these words associated with anger and like negativity and frustration, right? And like if you don't have the discipline to stop yourself from saying these words 24/7, what you're essentially doing is giving into your emotion and will, which is why I think scientists are like, it's good for you, like, like not scientists, but like it's proven that it's good for you. It's an expression of passion. But if you're not disciplined enough to stop yourself from cussing in your life, then that means you are basically just a slave to your passion and your will and your emotions. And at that point, like, we're not even better than animals at that point, because animals act to their emotions and their will. They survive. But we can't give into it. That's why I think that's bad.
And I also think that's a big difference between sort of the mainstream ideology of having no inhibition, having no restraint in certain aspects of life, like you said, like saying cuss words is a way to release energy and release stress. But the way I was taught is like Islam is a religion that it's just the way I was taught. But the way I was taught is that Islam is a religion that promotes discipline and promotes having restrictions on life, because this life is temporary. It's not somewhere where we are able to just fully like do whatever we want. There are certain rules and restrictions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed on us. And if we, the words, like, yes, they're important, but also actions speak louder than words. We all know that. So if I'm unable to control my own words in a scenario, how, like, if I can't even have the inhibition and the restraint to control the words that come out of my tongue and have intent and action behind it, how is that going to translate? How am I going to have the even increased inhibition and increased restriction I need to have when I'm doing certain actions and things that when you're dealing with other people, when you are in your work or in your school or anything that is an action that you have to do, those things last longer and those things are more dangerous. And if you can't have the inhibition to say not to cheat on your test, or not to clock out early from work, or to do something immoral at work, or not to cuss. And cussing is just, you're just saying that with your tongue. But doing something with your hands, if you can't have the inhibition, like the way I personally see it is that the reason why I try to stay away from cussing as much as possible is because if I can't even have the inhibition to stop myself from saying a single word, how am I going to have the inhibition to stop myself from raising a hand?
Yeah, and that's kind of how I stopped myself from. That's how I reduced my cussing too. Was like, well, okay, that's not how I reduced it, but that's why I reduced it, right? Yeah, so like we'll talk about like how to, like some methods we use to reduce like a cussing. At least I did, but because at this point I think cuss words, like for me, they only slip out like once in a while. Like I'm talking like once in like 2-3 weeks. And when they do, and one of the things, the techniques I'll talk about is like how I like in the moment immediately amend and reprimand myself, and as well as like in a way ask for forgiveness. But I'll explain that later. But the reason what you said is like partly as to why I stopped cussing was I realized, okay, so if I'm gonna fight with someone and I just know I'm already cussing, what's gonna stop me from hitting him? Or like if you're in a fight with your wife, right? Like people don't think about this, right?
But we see a lot of movies and TV shows with the whole abuse scenes, and
whole abuse scenes, and like
right before the hand comes out, the words come out.
Yeah, and if you look at like levels, right? It starts like by words, then hands, then not even hands, but like you can be walking out the door, right? And that's like a disrespecting, like forget you, I'm gonna leave. And then the next day it's another fight, then you go to the hands and you start hitting, right? So the thing is, if you're already used to like the cussing aspect, which is like using your words to hurt the other person in an abusive manner, and that's just what you're doing, and you don't
even mean it. Sometimes you don't even mean it in an abusive manner, but those words have so much more power than the words we actually want to say.
When they don't work, then you move to the next level, right? And so then what is the next level? It's something that's even worse. And that's why you see these abusive families where like the dad is abusive towards the mom or something, and it's like a consistent thing where they're using their hands because even their hands aren't working anymore, so they start using other.
It comes down to inhibition and restraint. If you can't have the restraint to control your tongue, controlling your hands is even harder. At least I personally believe that. I think because actions speak louder than words. It's like it's
a downhill trend.
Like
once you start on one thing, it's to go worse and worse and worse. If you train yourself, if all you know is how to handle a situation in a positive manner, with like a sit down and talking and like sharing the discussion and letting them talk, you talk, listen, right? All those kind of like different like methods of mannerisms that come to like positive problem solving, then even if you get really, really, really angry, the next step is the cussing. You're not used to it. And that's why it's a problem in high school and college, is because we normalized it.
I think also the connections that we draw was, like, obviously cussing in sports, that's frustration and anger. But then you start using cussing in positive situations too. I think that's the most dangerous way that cussing sort of pervades into a person's life, is when you start, even when you feel good, you use cuss words. Even when you feel positive, if you feel excited about something, you use cuss words, but then it's the same exact cuss word you're using when something is bad. You're just using it in a multi-purpose way. And sure, there's lots of memes on Instagram that are like, oh, like a certain cuss word is so great because it's so multi-purpose and you can use it for anything. But I think that's where in the danger lies. Is the fact that you can use it for anything. The fact that there's so many connotations to it, meaning that it enters your life in a way that can enter into any place in your life. And that's probably the most dangerous aspect of it, I personally believe. That
also falls in line with how easy it is now too, because it's normalized, but also like people cuss through like screens, right? So like behind screens, and that protection is like really, really good. But just like you were saying, you're using it in positive tenses, you're using it in negative tenses. You can now also use it through your phones, and and here's the issue with cuss words. They're very subjective. Some people think they're super positive, some people think they're super negative, right? So you might be using it without knowing its full impact on a person. But like um one of like a cuss word like the R word.
Mm-hmm.
There's only one R word. If they use a cuss word, I hope there's only one. If there's more now, but if it's a cuss word that's used in a derogatory fashion for people who are disabled or mental illnesses, yeah. So that is a word that is a negative connotation onto them, but people will use that just because their friend did something like, you know, like goofy, right? Like he did something like, I don't know, like I made a remark that everyone's laughing at, and then you just call them the R word for no reason, right? So the thing is, that's also super dangerous because it's so subjective. You don't know how this word will impact people who hear it. If they're in the surrounding, if they're right next to you, if that's the person, if they feel like they have like, you know, mental illness. A lot of people have like mental illnesses aren't, you know, they're not like physical.
They're not always super prevalent. Yeah, and there's high functioning, lower functioning. There's a lot of psychology and psychiatry behind that.
You know, and like even ADHD is like, it's like very common. So you never know who will have ADHD. But now if they grew up or if they feel like their ADHD is a negative thing and then someone's calling them with the R word, it's a double whammy, like putting them down. So that's the other problem with it is how
I think easy it is. I even had a story where like someone called someone in our friend group that, and then the dude was like, "Yeah, I am."
Like he is like.
I think he was on the autism spectrum. So.
Oh wow.
But we didn't really know it because he was more towards the end of the spectrum where it's more higher functioning and there's more masking behind it.
Sure.
But he was on the spectrum, and then someone just called him that because I think he did something goofy, like you said, like something that was silly, and someone called him that, and you don't know. That's what coming back to the power of these words and the direct meaning of these words is something that is so sometimes sinful, sometimes derogatory, sometimes just something that we as good Muslimin should not be engaging in, should not be using our tongues for that purpose. A tongue, once again, we come back to this idea of an amana. It's a gift and a trust from Allah. Animals don't have the opportunity to speak to us like we do to each other with the higher level functioning, with the higher level thinking that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with. The ability that we are able to take words and put them together into sentences and convey our thoughts and build upon those thoughts and read and write. These are all things that we do with our tongue and our minds and our words. And I want to come back to gratefulness again. That was another episode. Go check that out on our channel as well. But having a gratefulness for the small things that we think are small, but in reality are huge blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. But these aren't ours. They're not something that we ourselves own. We didn't make our tongue. We didn't make our brain. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made these things and gave them to us to be able to use as tools in our life. And why use those things in a way, this is the framework that I come back with, is why use those things in a way that will bring you either no good deed or even sins, then use those things that can bring you good deeds. And I was listening to, this was a khutbah a long time ago that I heard. It was at some masajid that I was in. But the sheikh was giving a suggestion of like, a lot of these words that we use them in times of frustration, in times of excitement, in times of anger. And these words can easily be swapped out with praises of Allah. So say you're just really frustrated one day and you're in a traffic jam, instead of saying, oh, blank, you just say, subhanallah, or alhamdulillah. And you can, by replacing those words, it's a very easy replacement to do. It doesn't change the meaning of what you're trying to express. And you get good deeds out of it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, once again, the other thing I come back to is, when we use these words, we are invoking these words in times of crisis, in times when we are in need. But who should we be invoking when we are in these times of need?
Allah subhanahu
wa ta'ala. And when, say you're once again traffic jam, I think that's the one.
Sure, let's go traffic jam.
I'm only saying this because I drove 80 miles this summer every day, and I'm like, I've been in so many traffic jams. So sometimes when you're just so frustrated when the car's moving so slow in front of you, instead of saying, oh, blank, you just say subhanallah, because you are in a moment of crisis. You're in a moment of need. You're in a moment of distress. Turn to Allah.
That also changed like the way you perceived it. Like if you say a cuss word that has a harsh ending, a harsh meaning, then it's like, I am putting this harshness onto this harshness. It gets harder, right?
Positive feedback loop.
But if you're saying subhanallah, alhamdulillah, right? You're also starting in a different light. Like, okay, I'm in
your heart.
Yeah, like I would be more inclined to think in a positive manner. Like I'm in a traffic jam, but I haven't crashed, right?
I'm alive.
Like, you know, I'm alive.
I have AC in the car.
Yeah. And if you get to fight with your wife, if you don't go into your like, I bring up this wife analogy because for me that was like the biggest thing. I was like, I cannot keep being the person who I am and expect this life that I want to live, right? And that's another thing with cussing is it's like these small changes. This is where it starts, and then you get to the proper treatment, and then you get to like being more consistent with the Quran, then you get to being consistent with prayer, then you get to being consistent with how you treat others, and then you become the person who everyone's like, I want to be like you, but you only get there.
I truly believe that just as cussing is a gateway into immoral acts,
Right.
closing that door to cussing can be a detour into more positive aspects of life and bringing you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah. You don't always have to take a step in, it's not a one-way path.
It's not. Yeah.
You can actually close off negative doors, so then you have less options and less choices, and you can get to that same position through a different manner. It's not a one-way path, like do this, do this, do this.
There's a lot of advice everywhere about opening certain doors, opening the door to the Quran, opening the door to Salah. And those are very important things that we should be implementing. Mm-hmm. But I think it's just as important for us to close the doors to sins in our life, and those can be great ways into creating a path for us towards goodness and towards a brighter future with that brings us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by closing the doors to immoral acts such as cussing or drinking and drugs, like our first episode, and closing these doors to certain things. Even though it might take a lot of inhibition and a lot of restraint, I think putting that effort in is a great pathway towards getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and increasing our iman.
And I think we mentioned it in one of our previous episodes, I don't remember which one, but in one of our earlier episodes we talked about like how we're like our actions, our words, everything will be seen on the day of judgment, and that's what will be judged on, right? Like,
I wrote this down too.
Yeah, and it's like your tongue is going to tell all of its stories. What did it say? The good, the bad, just like weighing the pros and cons. And I want you to sit down and think, in what situation is a cuss word, even on a football field, going to be considered a good deed, right? Like, just tell me, like seriously, like, sure, in the moment you're able to get your passion and your will out, but when you're in the day of judgment, your passion and will, they're not there anymore, right? It's not what you want. You don't control your emotions. You're being judged, right? So if you think about it, like from this perspective of like, oh, it's good for me, I get to express myself. Sure, but look at the trade-off, right? It's all about the trade-off. Is like,
especially when there are alternatives to that.
Yeah, and the bad
and sure, the alternatives might not be as socially cool.
Sure, that's a big thing.
Social credit or the social respect 100%. That you want from your teammates.
100%.
But isn't it more important to get the respect of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the day of judgment than the respect of other people? And yes, I know we're saying all this stuff like really offhandedly and really freely, but these are very hard things to do. And I know it because I think all through high school, I never implemented any of this. So inshallah, hopefully if you're hearing this podcast, this will be a tool for you to use if you are in high school or if you're in college, as a way to replace those cuss words with praises of Allah or with du'as or things that are light on the tongue but heavy on but that may be heavy on the scale on the day of judgment. Because I think like it's very easy to say, hey, just replace it or just switch it out.
Sure.
And it's hard. It definitely is very hard, and it requires a lot of effort and a lot of restraint and a lot of inhibition and restriction on your life and putting that work in. But inshallah, one step at a time. Maybe just take one cuss word that you use on a daily basis. Take the cuss word that we all talk about, the one that's like probably the worst that I've encountered so far. Sure. We all know which one we're talking about. Yeah. So just take that word out and just replace it with everything else, and maybe keep everything else for now, and then slowly work on like replacing one cuss word with a praise of Allah. Yeah. And inshallah, that can bring us closer.
So how about we dive into like how to like some methods we know how to stop, and then we'll go from there. So
for sure. What was your big strategy that you were talking about how you like reprimanded yourself?
My biggest strategy was, so people think I have two main strategies. Okay. And they go hand in hand. So on one hand, people think you have to remove yourself from an environment to become someone else. So that's the first strategy. That's not my favorite strategy. That's like the secondary.
It's not ideal because
it's not ideal. You got to change up everything.
We live in a world where we meet all kinds of people every day. And Islam is a practical religion.
Sure. So, but one of the greatest things is like, you know, if you're like not in an Islamic environment, like until college, I didn't have like a really strong MSA. So when I came to college and then I was in that MSA, when I did slip up at this point in time, like I was pretty good on cuss words too. I didn't say that many, like, and now I'm like way less. But when I came into college, like they would flag it, like members of the MSA would literally flag me, they're like language, and I'm like, yeah, you're right. So that's where getting into another environment can help. But that's not my favorite way. That's not the way that everyone can do it. So it's not like the easiest way. Like you might not have that environment to take yourself out in place, and it's also hard to leave everything behind and switch into something else, you know. But my favorite method, I have to write this down too. Okay, so my favorite method is rather than remove yourself from an environment, stay where you are, but internally become stronger in the fashion that you're willing to talk about your your feelings. Now let me explain what that means. Actionably, that means, okay, I'm in a group of friends, football players. We're all talking. I cuss. Now, if I register I cuss in 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, as long as within the 10 seconds range, if I cussed, then I say out loud, I shouldn't have cussed. Like, my bad, I should not have cussed, right? And your friends are going to look at you for a second, at least the first time, and they're going to be like, it's okay, we don't care. If they're your friends, or if they're like, why, right? If they ask you, and you're like, then you say there, I am trying to cut down my cussing. And that is also, this is also a different topic we can talk about another day, but that is also the point in time you'll find out who your real friends are and who actually cares about you versus
friendship
who
might
just...
be a great topic first.
Friendship would be a great topic, but this is a great way to also see who my friends are and who actually cares about me. Because if they're like, nah, bro, it's fine. But okay, sure, maybe the one time they say that, then you explain why you're doing it, why you're trying to stop. And if they do it after that, then I promise you they're not your real friend. They don't have your best interests at heart. Because they would be cool with you doing anything that is not going to hurt them at least. And you stopping cussing is not going to change the economy of the world or, save the entire planet or destroy the entire planet. It's not their problem. So that's my favorite method is flagging it yourself verbally out loud. Not in your head, oh my bad, I shouldn't have cussed in that 10 seconds. But saying out loud, man, I shouldn't have cussed. Then you realize your good friends also next time will tell you not to cuss because they'll feel comfortable telling you because you are yourself trying not to stop.
Also, if they're actually your friends, they're like making fun of you, so that's just another thing for them to make fun of you about. So every time you cuss, they'll be like, bro, stop cussing. Yeah,
they're like, I thought you were a pious man. Like you shouldn't be cussing. Now, sure, if they're your close friends and you feel comfortable with that, then you don't have to say anything. Absolutely. Like that's a way for you to stop too. But if you feel uncomfortable again, you express that. And if they are your friends, they'll worry about that. But you basically need to show them. So how all that sums up is like if you're cussing and you don't have a way to remove yourself from that environment, stay in that environment, stay with those friends, those 5-10 guys. Every time you cuss, 5-10 seconds later, after realizing you have cussed, verbally say to them, oh man, I shouldn't have cussed. Keep doing that and people will look at you and see your identity as this person does not cuss. Even if you did cuss. And that's the way I think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kind of perceives us too, is we all sin, but we look at people who repent. So repentance is super important. And that is your identity. Repentance is your important identity, not the sins. Everyone's a sinner. You pick, everyone's, again, with your wife, you pick your wife, your husband, you pick a sinner. There's no person who is perfect. The question is, you can pick a person who is repenting and who isn't repenting. So if you repent among your friends and your cuss words, then they will look at you and then they will see someone who doesn't sin. That's your personality. So you embody being not a cusser.
Sure, it might not be like the coolest thing ever, but
it's not gonna be cool.
It's not gonna be cool.
It is. If you're watching the YouTube video, it's not gonna be cool. It's not gonna be cool whatsoever. Like people will laugh at you, and people will like you'll lose people. You will lose friends.
You definitely. I think I realized that too. I think towards the end of my junior year. My junior ended early because COVID, but towards the end of the first semester of junior year, I was trying to cut down on cussing just because I think at that point I was like figuring out who I was more. And definitely there were people who just didn't want to hang out with me because I wasn't that fun anymore. Because cussing is like, it is a part of the culture of who you hang out with and whether, and I think the culture of it is just that cussing is fun and something that people do. And if you're not cussing, then you're not funny and you're not.
I would equate cussing to partying and drinking every weekend.
Absolutely.
Like that. Those are the people.
Those things go hand in hand. Like I was saying, it's a great way into that.
If you walk down campus at like on a Saturday night or a Friday night, and just like walk on campus and it's like nighttime and there's like a group of guys passing you, and they're all drunk.
Every second word is cuss
Every second word is a cuss word. They're walking back to you. They're singing words like they're singing with you, like at you. Like, they're just out of their mind, right? Because they're drunk, right? And they're cussing, and to me that's like.
And obviously, like,
went hand in hand.
Obviously, drinking is bad and no one should ever drink. But like the chemical reaction that happens when you drink is that all your inhibitions go away. So you're seeing the true person for who they are, and you realize when you start cussing and when you start doing things like that, all your inhibition goes away. First of all, drinking and drugs. Go watch our episode again. All your inhibition goes away. But once your inhibition goes away, you see who you are truly, and you see that person is someone who just all that's in their head is cuss words. And it takes a toll on your body and your mind.
That's my take on rap music too. We'll talk. Music is a very complicated topic, but
we need to do a lot more research into that.
But if there's a lot of music and rap music has a lot of cuss words, then it's a part of every single sentence. Like, and to me, it lowers your value too, because if you look at it, cuss words don't actually have any weight like they have a harshness, and
there was a weight, but I feel like we sort of took it away.
But their weight is carried over to their harshness. So if you're using it in a harsh way, yes, there's a lot of weight to it. But I'm saying value within a sentence, right? Like in a sense of away from expressionism and
if you took that word out, the sentence would still make sense. It still gives off the meaning you want it to, but it doesn't have that harshness, like you said.
Yeah, and if you take all the other words except the cuss word, it's just a floating cuss word. It doesn't mean anything, right?
It doesn't. I'm sure there's meaning, but I feel like like you said, we took that meaning away and put a connotation on it that could be used multi-purposely.
Exactly. Yeah, and so that was at least that's a long winded answer for like what my favorite two methods are.
Your second strategy was really good, actually. I think I might try implementing that.
Second strategy, the one where you like verbally tell your friends.
Tell yourself and your friends.
Yeah, that's my favorite because I'm a big proponent of now embody the personality you want. Like embody being a Muslim, embody being a non-cusser, embody being someone who works out every day.
It's actually another topic we might want to get into is embodying Islam.
Embodying Islam. But like you, in this case, you are that is who you are. So even if you do it, people will look at you weird when you're doing it because you're not supposed to be that person.
Yeah.
So that's why you verbalize, even like your goals sometimes. Like say them out loud, write them on a piece of paper, tell your mom, don't tell the entire world, but tell you like your mom, your dad, your brother, the people you trust. They'll hold you accountable. They'll look at you like when you're not doing it, they're like, I thought you wanted that. And then you'll sit there and you're like, I did want that. Do I still want it? Right? So same thing with this is the actionable way to go about it is not letting it stay in your head. The actionable way to go about it is put it out there, become that person even before you become that person. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. So. I mean, obviously there's that whole like manifesting thing that like is on Instagram, which is but what more but like the sort of important lesson I guess that can be taken from that is the fact that like saying what you want to do sort of gives the people around you a way to shine the light for you towards the goal that you want to go to. So say obviously you can shine your own light towards the goal that you want to achieve, but if you have other people that are also directing you towards that, they're kind of like guardrails on the road. So having that is definitely a good way to do it. So I think I'm definitely gonna implement that too. It's just trying to cuss. I'm just like I shouldn't have said that.
Cuss. And it's a double-edged sword. So you also get other people helping you, but also personally, you retain more information and when you put it out and you hear yourself. So if you do that continuously, you begin to retain and catch yourself. Eventually, it'll happen before you think of the word, versus after. So. But as long as you're trying to improve, even if you died and you were still cussing in every sentence, but you gave
in your heart, you repented and you knew it was wrong. Those are the two things I believe.
You gave an honest shot at constantly trying to stop. Then that's better than not even trying.
Absolutely.
In my opinion.
I think the last thing I want to touch on is also respect, which I think for me personally is the biggest reason why I even started cussing is because I wanted the respect of the people that I thought I wanted the respect of, but thinking back now, those weren't the people that I wanted the respect of.
It's like the sports teams and those guys,
people, the people that hung around the sports players, because I was part of the sports team, so I wanted to like fit in. But also realize that obviously you want the respect of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, and you're only gonna get that by not cussing and by being a good person. So, but even the respect of people, understand that people might respect you in the short term for cussing and be going along with it and like doing whatever they're doing. But in the long term, the character and the akhlaq of who you are, when you see and when other people view you as a person of who you are, you're gonna get a lot more respect if you don't cuss. And I think over time I've found that like coming into college and dealing with more Muslim people and being around more Muslims, I realized that when I don't cuss, that people respect me more for that. Because inshallah, I hope everyone gets to a point where they believe that cussing is bad and that we shouldn't be cussing as Muslims. So if you have that in your heart, when you see someone who also isn't doing it, you will respect that person for who they are, and you'll view their character as that, like you were saying. And that actually ties back into my whole like wife analogy, which is like you will look for those type of people, you will become those people, and cussing is an indicator too. It usually indicates towards other aspects of a person's life. Brain function, how much of a critical thinker. It doesn't require a lot of thinking to cross. Yeah, not really. It exactly. It's more of a submission to your passion and your will and your emotions, right? So, and it's also like it's association with different things. Partying, drinking, smoking, all that kind of stuff. Actual meaning of the words. So yeah, and I think we should take a lesson from like just like what we see in Islamic context, like when it comes to like going to a masjid, cussing is nowhere in a masjid. That doesn't exist. It doesn't, and I don't think anyone wants to actually be cussing in a masjid, but when you start cussing so much, it just slips out, and then you realize how how big of a thing it is there, even though it wasn't that big of a thing on the football field.
Yeah, exactly. And so like for that reason, it's not like something that you should or need to be doing to survive.
Yeah.
And that's where it comes back down to like discipline and not being subject to your own emotions and losing control. And that's another thing. Cussing, like in its essence, is when we lose control.
Yeah.
Right? Like if it eventually becomes part of your habit, then you're using it in every sentence.
Yeah.
But in a sports sense, in an anger sense, in a like frustration sense, those are all lack of control areas. Like sports does not, when we're saying sports, we don't mean like just because you play sport. We mean that you lose control in sports. You're very emotional. You're very like, if anyone who plays sports knows this, especially if it's competitive. This is competitive, very competitive sport. You lose the control and then you cuss.
Yeah, and it's a good thing to lose control when you're like, say you're like, I played volleyball, so when you're like spiking a ball or you're like getting a pass, like it's important to like lose that control and like control of your body. Yeah, but control of your mind is a thing that you always want to have. And even coaches will say this, but like having court awareness and being aware when you're playing a sport is very important, even if your body is like giving full force.
You can be powerful without giving into your emotions. Like I saw some really good athletes who were just really, I've seen them like, if like it's not it. Wow, that was a lot of stuttering. But I don't know where to begin, but I just know athletes who play at a professional level. And those athletes are some of the most cool and collected, calm athletes in their brain because they can't afford emotion.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So even though like they are mad or they are angry, they can't afford it because if they make a mistake, they can't cuss because they're going to be the exact guy who scores the next play.
Yeah.
And if they score the play, if they cuss too much and get too hyper out, that's overconfident, and then they'll be the one who are making a mistake the next play. Yep. So they're very cool and calm and collected. So in the same sense,
kind of back to the respect again. Like a cool, calm person is always going to be more respected than someone who's has a lack of control, has a lack of self-awareness.
Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely.
Especially if you can execute at the same level.
Yeah.
So
I think today we talked a lot about the different reasons of why we shouldn't cuss, and also the ways we can sort of mitigate us cussing in general daily life.
Yeah.
Inshallah, hopefully this helps you all and is sort of a pathway towards being aware of the words that we're using, and the ways in which we're using our tongue. And I think we can obviously do another episode going more deeper into other ways we use our tongue other than cussing. But because cussing is, like I said, it's a gateway, and it's a gateway into other things that we can use that we can do with our tongue. This is a manner that we've been giving with. But inshallah, today we covered cussing.
I want to say one last final thing, but I don't know how to sum it up. Basically, use these words at your own risk.
Words are powerful. Words are very powerful.
Right. You have not only responsibility unto yourself, your own iman, your own body, your own soul, but you also have a responsibility onto other people. You have a responsibility to your family, your sisters, your brothers. Muslims are blood relations. And if you use cuss words, there is a very real chance that you can hurt those close to you.
Absolutely.
So in a way, if you care about people, if you care about your wife,
and it's also stop that. Words carry that meaning over time. Yeah. So while you might
it compounds too.
Yeah. Generational trauma, things like that. That's how these things start. So inshallah, this is all like looking towards the future and seeing the effects of our words, but understanding that the things that we do now, the small habits that we set from here on out, and this goes for anything, not just cussing, but small habits that we set from here on out will last us throughout our lifetime and will determine who we are as people. So inshallah, jazakallah khair everyone for listening. Welcome to season 2 of the College Muslim. We hope to bring you a lot more episodes here on out. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.